Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Beyond Tears, Living After Losing a Child, by Carol Barkin, Audrey Cohen, Lorenza Coletti, Barbara Eisenberg, Barbara J. Goldstein, Madeleine Perry Kasdan, Phyllis Levine, Ariella Long, Rita Volpe, and Ellen Mitchell. Narrated by Pam Ward. Introduction. There are certain truisms in life. One of them is that it goes against the natural order of things to bury one's child. However, as bereaved mothers, we can no longer believe in natural order. Our comfortable, secure lives, our innocence, all were shattered with the deaths of our children. Now our reality is upside down, inside out, and far removed from what we thought it would be. Each day is a learning experience in a course we never signed up for, in a life we never anticipated. Along the way, we have each acquired some degree of healing, and we have reached a point in the road where we can now share what we have endured. We hope our stories will shed some light for others who find themselves walking the same dark path. This, then, is a book that no one ever envisions needing. It talks of how we wake each day and pass the hours, when there seems scant reason to do so. It tells of how we go on when going on appears pointless, and it explores ways in which we manage to exist when our lives seem hollow and we are left to wonder, why me? Why my child? We are 9 women of similar backgrounds. We all lost children who were teens or young adults. They died as the result of either illness or accident. Although we had never met before our sons and daughters were taken from us, we eventually gravitated to one another as we searched desperately for understanding. Now we are a large part of each other's lives. We meet regularly for dinner. We endure mutual pain. We phone each other at all times of day and night. We sit together for hours, listening, writing, reading, and listening some more. As a group, we revisit places that others have long forgotten, but which we cannot bear to leave behind. We have survived in concert with one another, even when we were in such deep despair that we wondered if our lives were worth living, and contemplated suicide. We leaned on one another when we could barely place one foot in front of the other if we had tried to stand alone. We owe our inner grit and spirit to the fact that we have shared our ordeal and bonded together. We have discovered the sad truth that beyond our own circle there is very little realistic and substantive help for those who grieve for the loss of a child. We have each found a crushing lack of awareness and understanding among many whom we should have been able to depend upon, such as medical personnel, clergy, social workers, bereavement counselors, and in some cases even family and friends. In this book, we share the practical approaches we take when people fail to be of help. We tell how we have learned to get through holidays and what used to be joyous family occasions. We discuss the changes that have occurred in our relationships with our spouses, our other children, and the entire family dynamic. We also voice our opinions of those who take their cue from the pop culture of our times to tell us it is time for us to get on with our lives and find closure. Indeed, since the horrors of 9/11, closure seems to have become the watchword of therapists, politicians, journalists, and television analysts alike. These civilians, our name for those who have not experienced the death of a child, have no idea what they are speaking about when they use this term. We, the experts, know all too well that there is no such thing as closure following the senseless and untimely death of a child. We have much to share. We know the value of a day's work in order to keep our thoughts from becoming mired down in our personal tragedies. We have learned how to react when a stranger asks, "How many children do you have?" We share what we do when a long-time acquaintance crosses the street to avoid the uneasiness of having to chat with us. We know how hard it is to face our dead child's bedroom and his or her favorite breakfast cereal. We deal with demons that come in the night and clumsy neighbors who come in the day. We memorialize our children by wearing their jewelry and by setting up foundations in their names. Because it is our hope that this book will be heard by grieving couples and their family members, as well as counselors, clerics, and others, we have included the views voiced by the fathers of our children. Much as we women have been there for each other through the years, so too our husbands have become well acquainted and supportive of one another. In some ways, their manner of experiencing and expressing grief parallels our own, but in other respects it is in marked contrast to our own. While our stories are different in detail, they are similar in some. Many of you probably have stories and needs much like ours. We know we can be a source of comfort to you. We have found there is much to be gained in just realizing there are others who have experienced the same horror and felt, as we all did, that they would not be able to keep a grip on their sanity. There is no clear roadmap for passing through parental bereavement. However, there is a path that takes us from relentless grief to what we now call shadow grief. Shadow grief is always with us, but it is bearable. We are helping each other along that path. It is our love for our lost children that has given us the inspiration, the strength, and the determination to put our thoughts and our words into book form. We have to believe our children made a difference in their far too short lives on this earth. They are with us every step of the way, and it is their memory and guidance that has helped us to develop this book, in which we share with you some of what has helped us to get beyond our tears. Jessica Rachel Cohen. Jessie was my only child. Not that that makes her story any more or less important than the others. That's just the way it was. Funny, but I always thought of her birth date, 7/11, as my lucky number. And I guess it was, just to have had her for those years. It's the only way I can think. After she died, we learned that a great many others whose lives she touched in her short life felt just as we did. As far back as nursery school, Jessie knew who she was and where she wanted to be. She was never bored. Life was her playground. She was content to be by herself, and she was just as content hanging out with her friends. She was interested in everything and loved learning. At parent-teacher conferences, she made me proud. I loved being Jessica's mom. Jessie's faith in nature was boundless. At the age of 4, she asked my husband, Irwin, we call him Irv, if she could plant a kernel of popcorn. He explained that the kernel was overprocessed and could not possibly grow. Not to be thwarted, she dug a small hole and planted a single kernel smack in the middle of our backyard. Irv spent the rest of the summer mowing around the corn that sprang up in the midst of our lawn. Jessie could pop the seed pods of impatiens plants or make an impression of a leaf using sunlight on photosensitive paper. She planted watermelons, cantaloupes, and splashes of colorful flowers, among them the bleeding hearts that still bloom and tug at our heartstrings every spring. All these years later, we continue to reap the fruits of Jessie's garden. In high school, Jess oversaw her school's video production program. She was always behind the camera, according to her television production teacher, who described Jessie as one of the greatest kids I have ever known. Today, there's an annual video production award given to a deserving student because of a memorializing fund set up by that teacher. I know I am a doting mom, and I don't want to leave the impression that Jessie was perfect. Far from it. But she was a very special treasure. Jess was poised and confident. She had a beautiful, though untrained, singing voice. She played the guitar, she played softball, she was a member of Mathletes, her school's competitive math team. And from the 5th grade forward, when she first came to know the story of our country's founding, she dreamed of becoming an American history teacher. She was patient and kind, and possessed strong convictions and a beautiful sense of decency. She was a true friend, but fiercely independent. Who but a teenager with a quirky sense of humor would teach their dog Clyde to communicate? She would surreptitiously tickle his neck so that he appeared to be shaking his head no in response to questions, usually of the "do you like so-and-so" variety. It all ended on June 30th, 1995, when Jessie was 11 days shy of her 16th birthday. We were visiting my husband's sister. We had driven up the night before and stopped at my stepdaughter's home. Irv had just taken retirement from Grumman, and Jess had just finished her sophomore year. A friend of hers, Krishma, was along with us. It's odd the things you remember afterward. I remember Krishma and Jessie sitting in the back seat of the car talking, and Jessie asking Krishma, who is of the Sikh faith, how anyone could agree to an arranged marriage. Krishma told her you just accepted what your life was supposed to be. I don't know why I remember that. We were up early that morning. It was so peaceful. We watched a family of deer grazing in the woods behind the house. Jessie was feeling good, and she made breakfast for everyone. Our conversation turned to what we wanted to do that day. Someone suggested golf. Someone else said shopping. Jessie wanted to water ski. My brother-in-law had a small boat and a pair of water skis that Jess had tried a couple of times before. I think she had stood up on them for a split second once, but she was never able to stay up. We decided to take her water skiing early, before the July 4th weekend crowds arrived. My sister-in-law and I stayed on shore because my brother-in-law thought too many people in the boat would make it harder for Jessie to get up on the skis. We played Scrabble, and in the distance I could see Jessie and Krishma swimming near the boat. Then I didn't see them anymore. The lake was still and almost deserted. At one point I did see someone water skiing, and I jumped up and asked, "Is that Jessie?" My sister-in-law said, "You're always so nervous." But I just didn't feel right. I was jittery, maybe because I was never comfortable in the water. Not like Jess. She was a good swimmer. She had no problem with the water. We had been there an hour or so when the boat pulled up and my brother-in-law was yelling, "She went down. She was hit. Call 911. Get an ambulance." I thought he was kidding. Then I realized he wasn't. I didn't know what to do first. Should I run to the boathouse? Should I go to Irv? I pounded on my brother-in-law's chest because he didn't want me to go to Jessie, but I ran to her anyway, and she was just lying there in the boat. I started screaming, "Please, Jessie, please don't die." Irv, who had dove in and pulled Jess out of the water, was telling me there was no pulse, no breathing, nothing. Jessie died when she was struck by a jet ski propelled by a mentally and physically challenged young woman who was left unsupervised. Her father later said he was sure he had locked the watercraft securely, but we don't believe that. We never had a personal word from that young woman's family. No letter, no apology. I can't forgive that. Maybe if someone else had been driving the boat, maybe if I'd been out there, maybe I could have seen something, done something. You turn the story over and over in your mind. After Jessie's death, at her high school memorial service, her English literature teacher said of Jessica, "Because she was in my life, I am a better teacher, a better mother, a better friend, a better person. She will unquestionably live forever." Would that she had. Audrey Cohen. 1. The morning after, the first year. We were studies in contrast in those early months. We were filled with rage, and yet we felt hollow. Our eyes brimmed with tears, and yet they were empty. We could scream, but speech came rarely, if at all. We were in excruciating pain, and yet we were numb. Our self-esteem was beaten down, and our trust shattered. But there was no one who could console us. There was no place to feel secure. We tried to crawl inside ourselves, but even that afforded us no place to hide. It was as if our very being died, along with that of our children. We were and remain forever changed. Carol. I had an earlier photo of myself on my driver's license. I looked at the eyes. I was a different person before Lisa died. Whatever we did during that first year was done from behind a veil of shock. Indeed, if we had to pick one word, one emotion that imbued our minds, our thoughts, our very being in that horrible first year, it would be shock. In some ways it obviously insulated us, because we learned later that what we thought was the worst possible pain could, from time to time, become even more acute as our lives unfolded. If there was any sensation at all that permeated the cocoon of shock in which we wrapped ourselves, it was exhaustion. Our bodies were encased in a relentless fatigue that left us drained of energy and debilitated during the days, but refused to allow us the luxury of restorative sleep at night. In that first year, we all refused to accept the finality of the death of our children, and some of us never will. It seemed that our existence had become surreal. It was as if we were each having an out-of-body experience. We wanted to wake up and find it was not true. This could not be our life. Phyllis. In that first year, I couldn't bring myself to say killed. I talked about loss. Only later could I say that Andrea was alone in the car and she was killed by an 18-year-old who didn't know what he was doing. Only 15 years later did I request a copy of the medical examiner's report. We speak of the first year, but actually attempting to define a first year is disingenuous. There is no universal calendar by which to gauge grief. With the passage of time, we have learned that the reactions of the bereaved differ from person to person, depending on where they are in their grief. Medical personnel, clergy, counselors, well-meaning but misguided acquaintances may tell you that you can expect to feel better by such and such a date. But they are wrong. No such timeline exists. Barbara G. There is no schedule for when you'll start to feel better. It's as if a scab forms over a wound. It can be reopened by the slightest trigger. Barbara E. It took me 5 years to even talk to my colleagues at work about it. 5 years seemed to be some kind of a milestone for me. Maddie. You have reached a new level when your first thought is of your child's life rather than a replay of their death. Early on, you will have to fortify yourself against insensitive comments from blundering friends, relatives, and acquaintances, some of whom should know better, and others who have no idea that you are bereaved. Even seemingly benign questions such as, "How are you?" or "How was your summer?" or comments such as, "Have a good day," will stab into you and throw you off balance. There's a cold chill that goes through your body each time some unthinking acquaintance tells you it's time to get over it. There is no getting over it. You will carry every detail of what happened throughout every day of your life, and you will forevermore categorize all events as occurring either before or after your child's death. The memory of your son or daughter is all that remains of them here on earth, and certainly if they were still alive you would think of them each day and worry about their well-being. Audrey. In fact, when your children are here, you tend to take them for granted. When they are gone, you think of them 24 hours a day. Ariella. You almost expect your child to call you and awaken you from the nightmare. Each of us has had to find our own way to accept the reality of our child's death. The best hope is that you will be able to hold close the beautiful recollections and let go of some of the dreadfulness. In the first months, the pain is raw and there is no escaping it. There are a couple of unlikely places, however, where we were all able to achieve some small measure of release. Surprisingly, we took to the car and to the shower for refuge. Both were hideaways where we could scream out loud. Rita. In my car, I screamed at the top of my lungs with hair-raising shrieks. At the end of the school day, I looked forward to that moment. People would look at me and think I was singing to my car radio. Lorenza. It was like an explosion, that moment, that privacy. Phyllis. My tears made me drive blind. Ariella. I screamed in agony in the shower and in the car. I couldn't comprehend that Michael was really gone. I kept crying out, "This can't be happening." Barbara G. I felt free to stand in the shower and say whatever I wanted. The water would drown me out. Some of us drove recklessly. We raced red lights. We felt no fear. Why should we? We had already experienced the worst that could happen. We drove as if on autopilot, not cognizant of where we were going or how we got there. We were never fully aware of the moment. As we drove, our minds raced to thoughts of our children and our pain. Sometimes our imaginations took over completely, and we thought we saw our children driving by. We saw them everywhere, but found them nowhere. Ariella. I remember sitting in the car and seeing someone who looked exactly like Michael, his hair, his hand movements. I didn't want the light to change. I just kept staring at him. In my head, it was Michael. I followed him for a while, thinking if I could just stop him and convince him to go to a diner and talk to me, I would have some connection to Michael. And then I thought to myself, you're crazy. Let it go. Searching for our children, for some indication of their existence, consumed much of our time in those early days and months. We heard their voices in our heads. We wanted to be able to reach out and touch them. We ached to feel their physical presence. Lorenza. I needed to hear Mark say "Ma," just the way he always did. I'd go to sleep at night hearing him say that. Rita. I needed to touch my son. It was a universal feeling. We all constantly looked for our children as if they were misplaced somewhere. Audrey. We looked for signs. If a light flickered, it meant Jess was there. She was always there. She followed me. Ariella. We all still believe they exist. I have to have a place where my child is. They don't cease to exist. We need to know our kids are okay. Maddie. One evening, my husband and I saw a young man who resembled Neil. He sat like Neil. He moved like Neil. I couldn't take my eyes off him. We sought help in places we would never have even considered in our previous lives. Lorenza. I had never heard of a psychic before, but in the first year, we all went to. Audrey. I think there is always the hope that the psychic will connect you to your child. Ariella. I didn't focus on what the psychic got wrong. I focused on what she got right, and some of it was quite amazing. I was able to cry, and had a feeling I was really talking to Michael. It was cathartic, like a telephone call. Rita. Whether it was true or not, it helped. Laughter was gone from our world. Now, years later, we laugh, mostly when we are with each other. The fact that we are able to laugh at all can oftentimes shock the civilian world, those who are not bereaved parents. Listening to music was unbearable. Lorenza. In the car, I would listen to talk radio. Talk radio saved me. To this day, at home, I fall asleep with my talk radio. Never any music. Maddie. Music became an emotional trigger. In that first year, most love songs and songs about breakups and broken hearts seemed to fit our lives and the loss of our children, and they still do. Ariella, the words will get you and cut you to pieces. You'll hear your child's favorite song, or the words take you to a place that is just too painful. You don't want the joy of music. You deny yourself. Euphemisms that we once took with a grain of salt become watchwords during those early months. We'd all heard the expression, "your skin crawls." Ours did. We'd all used the phrase, "with a heavy heart," or "a hole in the heart." These things became all too true. Rita. I could not deal with the fact that my son was under the ground. It made my skin crawl. Audrey. My body would crawl. I'd pull off my clothes, my shoes. Lorenza. The heavy heart was like a heavy coat. It was always there. It never lifted. The pain we felt was actual physical pain, made all the worse by the mental anguish and oppressive and constant exhaustion. We were subject to panic attacks, headaches, bouts of piercing stomach pain, and changed eating habits. Carol. I had difficulty breathing. I was constantly sighing out loud. There's no refuge from the pain. You crave peace, and there is none. It's an awful place to be. The pain is unrelenting. Phyllis. I was so exhausted it was an effort to live. Barbara E. For the first few months, my husband and I didn't leave the house. It was difficult to even sit up. We spent our days and nights sleeping on the family room couches. When I returned to work after 3 months, I didn't have the energy or concentration to finish the day. At lunchtime, I would race home and collapse on the sofa. After sleeping a while, I would return to work and count the minutes until I could return to the sofa. Audrey. I forced myself to go to work. Then I would leave abruptly in midday and go home. I would read and fall asleep on the sofa. Then I'd wake up and go back to work, forcing myself to finish out the day. Rita. I'd fall asleep and wake up with a jolt. I'd wake up 5 or 6 times, and each time it kept coming back to me as a brand new shock. It would always be new. Barbara G. One of the things that made me so tired was just going through the motions of living out the day. I felt so tired. But the nights were even worse. Audrey. I'd lie there and relive what happened, like a tape in my mind. Barbara G. The tape would play over and over. We were always waiting for a different ending. Lorenza. It was like wearing a heavy mask all day, knowing I had to pretend. I think just carrying around that mask made me tired. Rita. I'd have panic attacks at the supermarket whenever something triggered a thought of Michael when I wasn't expecting it. We all thought we were going crazy. We were bombarded with feelings we couldn't even name. We couldn't get our right foot in front of our left. Barbara G. It was difficult to swallow food, and I lost too much weight. It seemed as though my muscles had collapsed. My acute vision suffered. The shock to the physical body is very real. I was told that whenever I see a new doctor, I should tell him or her that I am a bereaved mother. It is a part of my medical history. Indeed, the ground beneath our feet took on new meaning. especially the hallowed ground in which we had just buried our children.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?